that's what the city respects and loves, is people that go out there and compete every day. And there was times where they didn't like how we played, and we figured it out. And now, we have something going, so something good. So just got to keep going now.
With a team like Detroit, losing 28 games in a row was devastating for the fans. And they put all the blame on Cade. And the entire NBA was laughing. Every night felt the same. The ball went up, the clock started ticking, and by the time the buzzer sounded, it was already over. Another loss, another quiet arena. Another night where hope just disappeared a little more. Fans were not even getting angry anymore. They were exhausted. They were showing up not to believe, but to witness how bad it could get. Because this was not normal losing. This was historic, this was embarrassing. And right in the middle of it all stood Cade Cunningham, the #1 overall pick, the face of the franchise, the player who was supposed to bring Detroit back to life. But now he was the face of the worst team in basketball. And the questions started getting louder. Was he the problem? Was he a mistake? Was he a bust? Because when you lose 28 games in a row, nobody cares about potential. Nobody cares about context. Nobody cares about excuses. They only care about results, and Detroit had none. If you love stories where players go from getting clowned by the entire league to taking over everything, make sure you subscribe right now. Because this story, it only gets crazier. To understand how things got this bad, you have to go back. Back to a time when Detroit was not a joke. Detroit was feared. This was not just another team. This was a franchise built on violence, built on defense, built on making every single possession feel like a fight. The bad boys did not just win games. They broke teams, they made superstars uncomfortable. They turned basketball into a war, and years later, the 2004 Pistons shocked the entire world. No super team, no flashy superstar, just discipline, defense, and a culture that refused to break. They did not just win. They earned respect. Detroit basketball meant something. It meant toughness, it meant identity, it meant pride. But over time, that identity disappeared. Slowly, quietly, the wins stopped coming. The playoff runs faded away. Seasons started blending together. No direction, no leadership, no hope. For more than a decade, Detroit was stuck. Not good enough to compete, not bad enough to fully rebuild. Just as stuck in the middle, watching the rest of the league evolve while they stayed the same. Every year felt identical. Different players, same results, losing. And then came the moment that was supposed to change everything. 2021, the #1 pick, a fresh start, a new future. And there was no debate about who it would be. Cade Cunningham. At Oklahoma State, he looked like the perfect modern superstar, a 6'8" guard who could control the game like a veteran. He did not rush, he did not panic. He played at his own pace while everyone else sped up. He could score, he could pass, he could read defenses before they even formed. Scouts called him a franchise cornerstone. Fans called him hope. Detroit called him the future. And on draft night, when his name was announced, it felt like everything had finally reset. For the first time in years, there was belief again. Cade walked onto that stage holding a jersey that represented more than just a team. It represented a city that had been waiting for something to believe in. Everything was lined up perfectly. The expectations were clear. He was supposed to fix this. He was supposed to bring Detroit back. But the NBA does not care about expectations. It does not care about potential. It only cares about what you do when the lights come on. And when Cade stepped onto an NBA court for the first time, reality hit hard. His first games did not look like the start of something special. They looked rough. The shots were not falling. The rhythm was off. Defenders crowded him, pressured him, forced him into mistakes. Every possession felt uncomfortable. Every decision felt rushed. Every miss felt louder. By the end of his first 2 games, the numbers told the story. 3 made shots out of 22 attempts. 8 total points. For a #1 pick, that was not just disappointing. That was fuel. Fuel for critics, fuel for doubt. Fuel for a narrative that would follow him everywhere. The internet reacted instantly. Clips of missed shots spread across social media. Comment sections filled with criticism. Analysts on national television started asking questions. Was he really that guy? Did Detroit make the wrong pick? Did they pass on someone better? For most rookies, early struggles are expected. But Cade was not treated like most rookies. He was treated like the face of a franchise. And in the NBA, that comes with pressure. Instantly, every shot mattered, every game mattered, every performance was judged, and in those early moments, Cade Cunningham did not look like a savior. He looked human. And for a fan base that had waited over a decade, that was terrifying, because hope had finally arrived, and it was already starting to fade. The expectations never left. They only got heavier. Because in the NBA, once doubt enters the conversation, it does not go away. It grows, it spreads, it follows you everywhere. And for Cade Cunningham, it was getting louder by the day. Every inefficient game became a headline. Every missed shot turned into a clip. Every bad night became proof for people who were already waiting to be right. They said he was overrated. They said Detroit made the wrong pick. They said he was not built for this level. And then, the word came back. Bust, not quietly, not as a question, as a statement. Bust. And if you're still watching right now, that means you already see how crazy this is about to get. So don't miss what happens next. Hit that subscribe button, because this is where everything changes. It was everywhere. Social media, talk shows, comment sections. Well, it was everywhere. Social media, talk shows, comment sections. It followed him after every game, every interview, every highlight. And the worst part, context did not matter. It did not matter that he was coming off an injury. It did not matter that he missed preseason. It did not matter that he was playing on one of the youngest teams in the league. None of that mattered, because the NBA only cares about results, and Detroit was still losing. But if you look closer, if you ignored the noise, if you actually watched the game, you could see something different. There were flashes, moments where Cade slowed everything down, moments where the game looked easy for him, moments where he controlled the offense like he had been in the league for 10 years. He recorded triple-doubles. He had 30-point games. There were nights where everything ran through him and it looked natural. Effortless. This was not luck. This was not random. This was skill, real skill. The kind that does not always show up in the win column right away. But there was still one problem. It was not enough. Because potential is not what people remember. Results are. And when the Rookie of the Year voting ended, Cade finished third. Not bad, but not what people expected. Not for a #1 pick. Not for a franchise savior. And in a league where perception becomes reality. That mattered because the doubts did not disappear. They got stronger. Going into year 2, everything was supposed to change. This was the leap. This was where Cade Cunningham would prove everyone wrong. The game would slow down. The confidence would grow. The numbers would match the talent. This was supposed to be the breakout. But it never came because after just 12 games, everything stopped. A stress fracture in his shin. Season over, just like that. No rhythm, no momentum, no chance to respond. For a young player trying to establish himself, there is nothing worse than that. Because development is not just about talent, it is about time. And Cade just lost an entire year of it. While he was recovering, Detroit kept losing. The losses stacked up. The standings stayed the same. The frustration came back, and once again, people started asking questions. Some questioned his durability, others questioned the rebuild, and many started asking the same thing again. Is he really the guy? The optimism that once surrounded him started to fade. At first quietly, then publicly. And just like that, the narrative changed. This was no longer about potential. It was about doubt. Because in the NBA, you do not get unlimited time. You do not get unlimited patience. You get moments. And if you do not take advantage of them, the league moves on. And it felt like the league was already moving on from Cade Cunningham. But while the outside world focused on failure, something very different was happening behind the scenes. Detroit was building, not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, piece by piece. They added Jaden Ivey, a guard with explosive speed who could blow past defenders like they were standing still. They brought in Jalen Duren, a powerful center who could dominate the paint and control the glass. Then came Oscar Thompson, length, defense, versatility. This was not a finished team. Not even close, but it was something else. A foundation, young, athletic, hungry. A group that could grow together. And at the center of it all, whether people believed it or not, was still Cade Cunningham. Because even through the injuries, even through the criticism, even through the losing, there was one thing that never changed. His control, his composure, his understanding of the game. He never rushed. He never panicked. He never lost that quiet confidence that made him the #1 pick in the first place. Inside the locker room, the belief was still there. Maybe not loud, maybe not visible, but real. The organization understood something the outside world ignored. Development takes time, and sometimes, the most important growth happens when nobody is watching. Practices became more intense. The chemistry started to build. The young core began to understand each other. Where to move, when to cut, how to trust. There was no guarantee of success, but there was direction. And for the first time in a long time, Detroit was not just hoping for change. They were preparing for it. The question was no longer just about talent. It was about timing. Because in the NBA, potential means nothing if you cannot turn it into results. And for Cade Cunningham, time was running out. The league had already started forming its opinion. Fans had already made their judgment. And as the next season approached, everything came down to one question. Could he finally prove them wrong? Or would the word bust follow him forever? The flashes were real, but flashes do not change narratives. Consistency does. And for Cade Cunningham, that was the missing piece. There were nights where he looked unstoppable. Nights where he controlled the entire game without even forcing it. Nights where everything slowed down around him, and you could see exactly why he was the #1 pick. He dropped triple-doubles. He had 30-point performances that looked effortless. He manipulated defenses with patience. Not speed, not explosion, just control. And that is what made him different. He did not play fast. He made everyone else slow down. That is something you cannot teach. That is something only special players have. But the problem was always the same. It did not lead to wins. And in the NBA, if it does not lead to wins, it does not matter, because fans do not remember potential. They remember results, and Detroit still did not have any. So even as Cade improved, even as his numbers went up, even as his control of the game became more obvious, the narrative stayed the same: bust. Because perception is powerful, and once it sticks, it is hard to break. But behind the scenes, something was changing, something quiet, something dangerous. Detroit was not the same team anymore. Not in the way they practiced, not in the way they communicated, not in the way they competed. This young core was starting to figure it out. Jaden Ivey brought chaos, speed that defenses could not keep up with. Jalen Duren brought strength, physical dominance inside that forced teams to respect the paint. Ausar Thompson brought defense, energy, disruption, and Cade brought control. Everything ran through him, not because he forced it, but because it made sense. He saw the game differently. He understood timing, he understood spacing. He understood where the defense would be before it got there. That is what separates good players from great ones. And slowly, very slowly, the pieces were starting to fit. Practices became more competitive. Mistakes turned into lessons. The chemistry started to show. Players began to trust each other. Cuts were sharper, passes were quicker. Decisions were smarter. It was not perfect. Not even close, but it was progress. And sometimes, progress is invisible to everyone except the people inside the building. The outside world still saw the same thing. A losing team, a failed rebuild, a #1 pick who had not lived up to expectations. But inside Detroit, they knew something was coming. They could feel it. The game was starting to slow down. Not just for Cade, for everyone. And when that happens, that is when things start to change. But the NBA does not wait for your development. It does not pause for your growth. It keeps moving. And if you are not ready, it will expose you. That is exactly what happened next. Because just when it felt like Detroit was building something, just when it felt like things were starting to come together, everything collapsed again. The season started with energy. There was movement, there was effort, there was belief. They fought hard in the opener. Then they won the next 2 games. And for a moment, it felt different. The arena had life again. Fans started to believe again. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was the turnaround. Maybe this was the moment where everything changed. But then reality hit again. The losses came back. At first, it felt normal. Every young team goes through rough stretches. One loss, then another, then another. But this time, it felt different. Because the effort was there. The games were close, they were competing, but they still could not win. And that is the worst kind of losing. Because you feel like you are close, but you never get there. 5 losses turned into 10. 10 turned into 15, and suddenly, this was not just a bad stretch. This was something bigger, something worse. The confidence started to fade. Players walked off the court with frustration written all over their faces. Coaches searched for answers that did not exist. The energy inside the arena disappeared. And the silence said everything. Because everyone knew what was happening. But nobody wanted to say it. This was getting out of control. 15 losses, then 20. Now it was national attention. Every broadcast mentioned it. Every highlight show talked about it. The Detroit Pistons were no longer just struggling. They were being watched. Watched to see how far this would go. Watched to see if history would be made. But not the kind of history anyone wants. And right in the center of all of it was Cade Cunningham. Every loss felt personal. Every question felt directed at him. Are you the guy? Can you lead this team? What is going wrong? The pressure was not building anymore. It was already there, and it was heavy. Because this is what being a #1 pick means. You do not just get the credit when things go right. You take the blame when everything falls apart. And right now, everything was falling apart. 10 losses, 15 losses, 20 losses. Now it was no longer just a bad stretch. This was history in the making. The kind of history nobody wants to be part of. Every game became bigger than basketball. Every possession felt heavier. Because everyone knew what was coming, and nobody could stop it. 25 straight losses. Now it was unbearable. The arena was no longer loud. It was tense. Fans were not cheering. They were watching in silence, waiting for the inevitable. Cameras caught players staring at the floor, coaches standing frozen on the sidelines. Nobody had answers. Nobody had excuses. And right in the middle of it all was Cade Cunningham. Every loss felt like it was on him. Every headline pointed at him. Every question from reporters circled back to him. Why are you losing? What is going wrong? Are you the guy? Because that is the reality of being a #1 pick. You do not get to hide. You do not get to blend in. When things go wrong, it is on you. And this was going very wrong. After one brutal loss, Cade finally spoke. He said they were not as bad as their record suggested. He said the team still believed. He said they were close. And the moment those words hit the internet, everything exploded. Fans mocked him, and analysts replayed the clip. Comment sections filled with jokes. Memes spread everywhere, to the outside world. It sounded like denial, because the reality looked ugly. 28 consecutive losses, history. The Detroit Pistons had tied one of the longest losing streaks the NBA had ever seen. And if they lost one more game, they would stand alone. At the top of a list no team ever wants to be on. At that moment, the narrative completely changed. This was no longer just a rebuilding team. This was a disaster, a collapse, an embarrassment. Even media outlets that rarely talked about basketball were covering it. The Pistons were everywhere, not for success, for failure, and Cade Cunningham was at the center of it. A #1 pick, leading a historically bad team. The word bust was no longer a question. To many people, it was already the answer. Bust, stamped, final. But here is the truth about moments like this. This is where everything changes. Because when you hit the lowest point, you only have two options. You break or you evolve. And Cade Cunningham was not going to break. Then finally, after weeks of frustration, after weeks of embarrassment, after weeks of being the punchline of the entire league, it ended. The Pistons won one game. That was all it took. And the reaction said everything. Players shouted. Some nearly collapsed. Not from excitement, from relief. This was not celebration. This was survival. The streak was over, but the damage was already done. The season ended with just 14 wins, one of the worst records in the league. Across the NBA, the opinion was clear. Detroit was still far away. Cade Cunningham was talented, but not special, not generational, not the player they needed him to be. The league moved on, just like it always does. But Detroit did not, because behind the scenes, everything was about to change. The organization made a decision. If they were going to rebuild, they were going to do it the right way. No shortcuts, no excuses, a new identity, a tougher culture, a return to what Detroit basketball used to be. And Cade Cunningham embraced it. The losing streak did something to him. It hardened him. Every criticism sharpened him. Every joke fueled him. Every doubt pushed him further. Workouts became longer. Film sessions became deeper. Every detail mattered. Every possession mattered. He was no longer just playing the game. He was studying it, breaking it down, understanding it on a different level. And slowly, without attention, without headlines, without noise, he was changing. This was not the same player anymore. Not mentally, not physically, not emotionally. He was becoming something else. Something dangerous, a leader, a problem. A player the NBA was not ready for. Because real growth, the kind that changes everything, it does not happen in front of cameras. It happens in silence, and by the time the world notices, it is already too late. Because when the next season began, something felt different, not just in the way Detroit played, but in the way they carried themselves. There was confidence, not loud, not forced, real, from the opening tip. You could see it. The defense was tighter. The rotations were sharper. The energy was consistent. This was not the same team that had just lived through one of the worst stretches in NBA history, and at the center of everything was Cade Cunningham. But this version of Cade was different. He was not trying to prove people wrong anymore. He was just playing, and that made him dangerous. From the very first game, you could feel it. Something had changed, not just in the way Detroit played, but in the way they moved, the way they communicated, the way they believed. This was not the same team anymore. And at the center of it all was Cade Cunningham. But this version of Cade was different. He was not forcing the game. He was controlling it. The pace slowed down around him. Defenders moved, but he was always one step ahead. He saw plays before they happened. He knew where the help defense was coming from before it even rotated. He dictated everything. This was not improvement. This was transformation. Detroit started winning. Then they kept winning. Then they could not stop winning. The Pistons opened the season with 15 wins in their first 17 games. Let that sink in. A team that had just finished with 14 total wins the entire previous season had already passed that number before the season even settled. This was not a small jump, this was a shock. A complete shock to the entire NBA. Analysts who had spent months laughing at Detroit now had to change their tone. Fans who ignored the Pistons started checking the standings again. Something real was happening, and Cade Cunningham was at the center of it. Night after night, he filled the stat sheet. 27 points, 10 assists, rebounds, steals, clutch shots, but the numbers did not even tell the full story, because the most impressive part of his game was how calm everything looked. No rush, no panic, no wasted movement. Every possession felt intentional. Every decision felt calculated. Detroit's offense ran entirely through him. The pick and roll became unstoppable. When Cade attacked, defenses had to choose. Step up or stay back, and either choice was wrong. If they stepped up, he found the open man. If they hesitated, he attacked the space. If they collapsed, he punished them with a jumper. He was not just playing, he was dissecting defenses. And there was nothing they could do about it. The young core responded. Jaden Ivey brought speed that overwhelmed defenders in transition. Jalen Duren dominated inside with power. Ausar Thompson disrupted everything on defense. For the first time in years, Detroit looked complete, balanced, connected, dangerous, and the wins kept coming. 7 in a row, then 10, then 13. The same team that once lost 28 straight games was now one of the hottest teams in the league. And Cade was not just playing well, he was taking over. There were nights where he dropped 30 like it was nothing. Nights where he controlled the entire game without scoring much at all. Nights where he dominated purely through decision-making. Then came the performances, the ones that made people stop and pay attention. 18 assists in one game, completely controlling the tempo, breaking down the defense possession after possession. Then another night, 46 points, attacking relentlessly, finishing through contact, hitting shots under pressure. And when the game slowed down, when every possession mattered, when the pressure increased, that was when Cade became the most dangerous. Because in those moments, he did not panic. He elevated, a step-back jumper, a drive-through contact, a perfectly timed pass. Clutch plays became expected, not surprising. Expected, opposing arenas grew quiet, because everyone knew what was coming, and they still could not stop it. Then came the night. Madison Square Garden. Bright lights, loud crowd, big stage, the New York Knicks. A team that had embarrassed Detroit not long ago. A team that represented everything the Pistons were trying to become. Tough, physical, respected, and Cade remembered all of it. From the opening possession, you could see it. Focus, control, intent. He was not reacting to the game. He was dictating it every time he touched the ball. Something happened, a drive, a pass, a jumper. The Knicks tried everything. Different defenders, different coverages, double teams. Nothing worked. Cade slowed the game down to his pace. He waited, he read, and then he attacked. Exactly where the defense was weakest. Possession after possession, he broke them down. By halftime, the energy in the building changed. The crowd got quieter because they were watching something. They could not stop. By the fourth quarter, it was over, not on the scoreboard, mentally. He had taken control of the entire game. 42 points, 13 assists, complete domination. Every basket felt like a statement. Every play felt personal. And when the final buzzer sounded, there was no celebration needed. The message was already clear. This was the moment. The moment where Cade Cunningham stopped being questioned and started being feared. From that night, everything changed. The conversation across the league shifted completely. No more talk about whether Cade Cunningham was good enough. No more talk about the draft. No more talk about the losing streak. Now the question was different. Is he the MVP at first? It sounded crazy, but then you looked closer. The numbers were there. The wins were there. The impact was undeniable. Because value in the NBA is not just about stats, it is about influence. And no player influenced his team more than Cade Cunningham. Detroit had gone from one of the worst teams in basketball to one of the best, and everything ran through him. Every possession, every decision, every moment. He was not just playing like a star. He was controlling the game like one of the best players in the world. On offense, he dictated everything. The tempo, the spacing, the flow. Every action started with him. Every read came from him. He made the game easier for everyone around him. And that is what separates great players from elite ones on defense. He competed. He fought through screens. He used his size. He made plays that did not show up in the box score. Winning plays, the kind that only real leaders make. And in the clutch, when the game slowed down, when the pressure increased, when every possession mattered, he delivered again and again. And again, this was not hype. This was reality. The same player who had been called a bust was now leading a contender. The same team that had lost 28 straight games was now one of the most dangerous teams in the NBA. That kind of transformation does not happen by accident. It happens through failure, through doubt, through pain. Because those moments force something out of you. They force growth, they force discipline, they force belief, and Cade Cunningham embraced all of it. He never ran from the criticism. He never hid from the pressure. He went through it, and he came out different, stronger, smarter, more complete. This is what the NBA is about. Not just talent, but resilience. Not just highlights, but evolution. Because the players who last in this league are not the ones who start perfect. They are the ones who adapt, the ones who learn, the ones who turn failure into fuel. And Cade Cunningham did exactly that. He took the lowest point of his career and turned it into the foundation of something greater. Now, when teams prepare for Detroit, they are not looking for weaknesses. They are looking for answers. Answers that are getting harder to find. Because Cade Cunningham has become one of the most complete guards in the NBA. A player who can score, create, control, and most importantly, win. The journey is not finished. The championships have not been won yet. The legacy is still being written. But one thing is already clear. The narrative is gone. The doubt is gone. The word bust is gone. If you made it this far, you already know. This was never just a basketball story. This was about proving everyone wrong, about turning pain into power, about refusing to break. So if you rock with that, make sure you subscribe and stay locked in. Because stories like this, they do not come around often. We thank you for watching until the end, and we will see you in the next one.